Today's scripture is from the book of Acts, chapter 10, verses 1 through 17. In Caesarea, there was a man named Cornelius, a centurion of the Italian cohort, as it was called. He was a devout man who feared God with all his household. He gave alms generously to the people and prayed consistently to God. One afternoon, at about 3 o'clock, he had a vision in which he clearly saw an angel of God, coming in and saying to him, "Cornelius." He stared at him in terror and said, "What is it, Lord?" He answered, "Your prayers and your alms have ascended as a memorial before God. Now send men to Joppa for a certain Simon who is called Peter. He is lodging with Simon, a tanner, whose house is by the seaside." When the angel who spoke to him had left, he called 2 of his slaves and a devout soldier from the ranks of those who served him. And after telling him everything, he sent them to Joppa. At about noon the next day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up on the roof to pray. He became hungry and wanted something to eat. While it was being prepared, he fell into a trance. He saw the heaven open and something like a large sheet coming down, being lowered to the ground by its 4 corners. In it were all kinds of 4-footed creatures and reptiles and birds of the air. Then he heard a voice saying, "Get up, Peter. Kill and eat." But Peter said, "By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that was profane or unclean." The voice said to him again a second time, "What God has made clean, you must not call profane." This happened 3 times, and the thing was suddenly taken up to heaven. Now, while Peter was greatly puzzled about what to make of the vision he had seen, suddenly the men sent by Cornelius appeared. They were asking for Simon's house and were standing by the gate. This is the word of the Lord.
So I have a feeling we've all had the experience where you learn that something that you thought was always one way is another way, and that's really what Peter's dealing with right now. And I was thinking about this in my life recently, and it not by no means is as big a deal as what Peter's dealing with, but I found myself confronted with something very similar to this. Because like many of you, I have opinions about what I like and what I don't like, most of which are inherited from my youth. And one of the things that I knew about myself, and I've known about myself for a very, very long time, is that I don't like broccoli. And I never quite understood it. It always smelled really weird and bad to me. I don't honestly remember being served it all that much growing up, at least not at home. And when I was, I routinely either did not eat it or put it on my sister's plate, because that's what you do. And my dislike of broccoli is something that served me well throughout my life. You just know there's one thing on the school lunch cafeteria tray that you're not going to take, and you're going to. And I will confess, I kind of looked funny at my friends who elected to have some. So this was all fine and well and good until a little while ago when I started to hang out with this new person in my life named Emily. And, and part of what you do when you're hanging out with somebody new is you eat a lot of meals together. And so I remember the first time that I had dinner over at her place with her 2 children. And, of course, what was on offer with the dinner? Broccoli. And God bless Lillian and Isaac, because they just had no problem with it. They tore right in, and then, and we ate it just fine. And then Emily went and, of course, handed me the bowl for me to serve myself some. And I had to have that moment, right? Because I'm trying to impress this girl, right? I don't want her to think that I'm a picky eater. So I take some and I cut it into very, very small pieces, which is the secret for eating something you don't want to eat. And what do you know, what I learned that day is that broccoli is actually quite good. Somewhere along the way, something shifted in my taste buds, and so I started to ask her, like, well, how did you cook this? And she told me, and I was just like, oh, okay. And about 2 days later, when I was home cooking for my children, I broke out a bag of broccoli, and they looked at me like I had 3 heads. They're like, Dad, we don't eat broccoli. And I'm like, oh, just wait until you try it. I promise you, it is different. So I had to learn something new. Turns out that the thing that I had inherited from my youth, that idea about the world and me and who I was and what the role of broccoli was in the world, turned out no longer to be true. I just never really had bothered to give it a try and to test it. So Peter is having a moment here where he is confronting his own inherited biases from his youth. Since he was a small child, from the beginning, he was raised that there were certain kinds of animals we eat and certain kind of animals we don't eat. And while we can, look back now and go, well, that's kind of odd. And I do love whenever you see like artistic impressions of this time, like the animals that come down are all like really, really weird. Right? I think there's a giraffe in there, and I don't think God's really saying, go eat the giraffe. Don't eat a giraffe. But, more likely it was things like, that we would consider very normal, like pigs. And then you have this moment where you really, really feel bad for Peter because you realize he's gone his entire life and he's never had bacon. Jeez. So Peter is having this reaction, and he's basically, and God in this vision is telling him, hey, you need to do this. And no doubt he is like, no, this is not what we do. And he's not just thinking this in his head. He's not just thinking it in his mind. He is having that kind of deep down, visceral, in your guts kind of reaction when somebody passes that plate of steamed broccoli over and you smell it and you just kind of want to die. He's having that moment. So even though he has been through all of the things that he has been through, even though God has done all sorts of incredible, crazy things in his life, he's seen Jesus do crazy, incredible things. He's gone through all of this. He's seen Jesus challenge the religious leaders at every turn he could. At this moment, he still can't quite get there because the thing that he has always known, the bias he has always had, that he was raised with from a very small child, was even in that moment still too strong. And God is testing him in this way because he knows that he's about to get a knock on a door that's going to test him in very much the same way. Because when you are a good and faithful Jew in this time, the last thing you want knocking on your door is the representatives from a Roman military leader. You're going to wonder why it is that they want to talk to you. This is not to Peter going to feel like a safe thing to do, going to see Cornelius, even though we know that Cornelius actually knows who God is and believes in God and offers his sacrifices to God. Peter doesn't know that. He doesn't know who this person is. He just knows he's being summoned by somebody important and powerful, someone who represents the people who are currently occupying his country. Peter, no doubt, is wondering if he should go or if this is the moment maybe he needs to run and hide. And when he gets there, he recognizes he is being asked to do something that even he probably didn't expect to be asked to do. Because Peter was a member of the same tribe and same people that Jesus was. And so far, they have kept the message and what they are doing to people like them. But with this moment between Peter and Cornelius, we see God flinging the doors open wide. Because Cornelius is a lot of things, and one of the things that Cornelius is a Gentile. And so now we have God specifically calling Peter to invite a whole new person from a whole different group of people into this new thing that God is doing. God is saying that when I told you, a few chapters back in the book of Acts, Peter, when I told you I wanted you to carry this message from Jerusalem to Judea to the ends of the earth, I don't know if Peter just wasn't getting on that fast enough, but in this moment, God brings the ends of the earth to Peter and says, this is what I meant. This is what you need to do. This thing that you are doing, this message that you have, this grace and this peace that you have known cannot be constrained to just people who look and act like you, Peter. You need to open the doors of your heart and open the doors of your mind much, much broader. And because he was willing to do that, because Peter was willing to do this unsafe thing and trust in God, and because he was willing to challenge some of his inherited assumptions from his youth about who's in and who's out and what you eat and what you don't, we all get to be here today. We are inheritors of this legacy of Cornelius, that God did not want his message, did not want the message of Christ, of joy and peace and all that he came to bring contained to just one little group of people in one little place. He truly intended it to go everywhere. And we get to be benefactors of that now. No doubt Peter thought what he was doing was a bit nuts, and no doubt the people around Peter thought what he was doing was a bit nuts, and they wondered how far this was going to go. Now, when I was thinking about the sermon today, a lot of things kind of came to mind, but there was a story about a doctor from about 150 years ago that I just thought resonated really well. And so back in Europe, I don't quite remember where, I must confess, there was a guy named Ignace Sommervlas. Clearly not from around here, right? But Ignace was a doctor and a physician at a time when physicians were just kind of really starting to become a thing. When they're just after a time when there start to be things like their profession of physician, where there start to be medical schools, there starts to be hospitals a little bit more prevalently around, and people start taking advantage of hospitals and healthcare in a way that they hadn't previously. And one of the things that starts to happen about the time that Ignace enters this profession is that women start to go to the hospitals to have their babies. That is obviously incredibly common for us today. It's how most of us probably came into the world, and it's been that way for a while, but it didn't used to be. And so when women started to come, to the hospital where Ignace worked, he noticed a couple of things. One is that they were there and they were able to help, and it seemed like a good thing to do. But he also noticed that a high percentage of the women, after they are giving birth, were getting sick, and getting sick in a way that they did not always or were able to recover from. There was something going on, and he didn't know what it was, because at this point, while we had doctors and we had hospitals and we were starting to have what we would call medical care today, there were certain things that we didn't actually know anything about yet, and one of the things that we didn't know about yet was germs. Now, it does seem a little odd for us to say, how can you even practice medicine if you don't understand things like bacteria and viruses and all that kind of stuff? But they didn't, because they didn't have a way to see it, and they didn't have a way of understanding it. And so while doctors had an important job at the time to help treat people who were sick, they actually didn't have much of an idea of how it is that people got sick in the first place. They knew if you put sick people close together, you put a sick person next to a healthy person, oftentimes that healthy person will end up getting sick. They knew proximity had something to do with it, but they didn't know why and they didn't know how, and there were all sorts of competing theories as to why it is that diseases spread. So he's in this time of great uncertainty. But he also looks around and he notices that the women who are coming to the hospital, who are being treated by the physicians and the doctors like him, are getting sick at a much higher rate than the women who come to the hospital and are seen by the midwives. And so he starts to ask this question. It's like, well, we have more education and we have more training and we have all this extra knowledge that the midwives don't have. How is it that they are having better results than we are? How is it that less people are getting sick? And Ignace decides to go and see how it is that they do what they do. And he noticed one important thing that the midwives were doing that the doctors were not. Anybody have a guess? They were washing their hands. And so really what Ignis is known for today and remembered for today is he's the one who discovered that apparently washing your hands is important, especially if you're around a lot of sick people. Now, he didn't, again, know why this was. He didn't know how it worked. He didn't know about germs or anything else. All he knew is that it did, in fact, work. And so he convinced himself and he convinced the other doctors in their hospital to give it a try. And lo and behold, when they started to wash their hands before helping women give birth, they got a lot less sick. And suddenly, with only that one change, the amount of sickness between the two groups, the ones with the midwives and the one with doctors, was the same. Now, you would think that educated people, like doctors and nurses and people who care, would see what he had done, and he wrote it all up, and he told people about it, and he wrote a paper about it, and all the things that you do. When he went out to share this information, there's this amazing thing you can do. It doesn't take much time, and it will help all of your patients in so many important ways. We have discovered it, and we have proven it here at our hospital. You would think that those doctors and nurses would go, that's a really great idea. We should all start washing our hands. They did not say that. And in fact, they called Ignis superstitious. They said they didn't believe it. And it took actually several more decades before the basic act of hand washing and after the discovery of things like bacteria and germs and viruses that we actually hand washing became standard practice in medical care. There was even a group of people who, when they were fighting back against this crazy, audacious idea, blamed Ignis's faith because he was a practicing Catholic. And they called him superstitious because he's believing in things you cannot see. We all have assumptions, and we use them every day. It would be exhausting to have to think about each and everything fully and completely and fully consider each and every decision we're going to make during the day, right? We'd barely be able to get out of bed if we had to consider every single article of clothing we owned before deciding which one to put on. We all make assumptions about the day and what we're going to do. It's how we get through world, and it's a wonderful tool to help us to be efficient. But sometimes that efficiency gets in the way of something else. And sometimes what God needs us to do is to challenge some of our inherited assumptions about how things are done or who is in or who is out or what's tasty or what's not. God is blowing open the doors of this thing that Jesus began. He is sending all of these disciples out into the world to carry the most important message humanity would ever hear. And he wants to make sure that they understand they are to spread that message as far and as wide to all the people in all the places they possibly can, because God's love and God's grace is for everybody. And the biggest challenge that the world had at that moment is they had not heard that news yet. And so Peter is sent to Cornelius to do something he no doubt would have assumed he never would do. Not only is he going to eat food that he's not supposed to eat, he's going to eat it with somebody he would have thought at that point he was not supposed to eat with, because God had bigger plans. What are our assumptions? What are we carrying with us about big, important issues, or what are we carrying with us about little things like broccoli is actually delicious? What might be God trying to open up inside of you and me or us as a church? Because we are here because we know and we believe and we need God's love and God's grace. Hopefully, while you're here, in whatever ways you come and encounter the ministry of this place, you feel the Holy Spirit moving. And know how wonderful and amazing it is and how great it is to feel the Spirit moving in our lives. We should want that. And we should want it for our neighbors too. Our neighbors we like, and our neighbors that annoy us. Our neighbors that look like us, and our neighbors that don't. Because that is God's mission and that is God's purpose. And he wants to make sure that we know that that is our mission and our purpose as well.